Then you will reach the range called Hemakukta, on whose gold-topped towers divine damsels descend to spend their hours composing and singing lyrics which lull even birds and beasts to sleep. Leave Hemakuta and go farther south. Let your search everywhere be swift. You will come upon Vidabra, with its frontiers marked with sandalwood and other fragrant trees, and a country of orchards of all fruits nature can offer. Let not your army tarry here for a feast. Thus he went on giving precise instructions for Hanuman's passage through several parts of the country, giving a clear picture of the landscape, mountains, valleys, and rivers to be crossed so that the army might proceed on the right lines and not get lost. Finally he said, do not let any holy spot divert your attention from your main task. If you find yourself approaching that holiest mountain, there Ruvgadam, make a detour. A visit to the spot will doubtless give you salvation, but seek your salvation later after Sita has been found. Ravana is not likely to have set foot on the sacred ground. Your time is limited. I will give you 30 days to search. Soonest after that, I want you back here with your report. Anjanaya was ready to depart, and at this moment, Rama asks, O learned one, if you come upon her, by what signs will you recognize her as Sita? Hanuman had no answer for this, whereupon Rama took him aside and explains, if you observe her feet, you will find her toenails glowing red like ruby. Her feet are incomparable. Observe her heels carefully. Learned men have compared them to the quiver. I will not describe to you her waist, which is, as it should be, delicate and unseen. It gave him a peculiar relief to recollect Sita's features in detail and describe them to Hanuman. Hanuman absorbed with respectful attention every word of Rama's without interrupting him in any manner. Rama succeeded in creating a complete picture of Sita in Anjanaya's mind, and Anjanaya began to feel that he was going in search of someone he had already known. In addition to her features, Rama gave an account of how she spoke, how she walked, what her voice would sound like, and so on. When you have seen this person, and if your conscious witnesses to it that she is the one and only person, approach her, observe the state of her mind, and talk to her. Ask her if she remembers how I saw her first on the terrace of Janaka's palace on that evening when I passed along the road in the company of my master, Vishmaritra. Did she not say later that if the one who had snapped Shiva's bow was other than the one she saw below her balcony in the company of Vishmaritra, she would give up her life? Did she not enter the hall of assembly at her father's palace, decked in jewelry, and anxiously glance up to know if it was I or someone else? Remind her that when we started out on our exile, we had hardly reached the towering gates of Ayodhya when she inquired innocently, where are the cruel, impossible forests that you spoke of? After these series of messages, Rama took the ring from his finger and said, give this to her. May your mission conclude successfully. Hanuman and Anganda went southward, taking a picked army with them. They crossed mountains and rivers, wherever they suspected Ravana might be hiding. They fell into a frenzy and ransacked every nook and corner searching for Sita. In their desperation to find shelter where she might be hidden, they rushed into the mouth of a cavern and, proceeding along a tunnel, found it impossible to get out. They were trapped in complete darkness. They lost all trace of direction, landmarks, forms, and outlines in all-consuming darkness. They had no doubt that Ravana had contrived this for them and felt helpless against a trickery designed to deprive them of their vision. Hanuman, through his extraordinary powers, helped them to edge their way along until they found themselves led deep within the bowels of the earth, after many an hour's journey, to an enchanting city of palatial buildings, squares, fountains, parks, and avenues. Although no sunlight could pierce so deep, there was an unchanging glow emanating from the brilliant golden domes, embedded with precious stones emanating a natural light. With all this perfection, there was not a soul in sight, no human or any being of any kind anywhere. Are we all dead and opening our eyes in heaven, or is this another illusion that Ravana has created for us? If we are dead, how are we to discharge our duties to Rama? If we are alive, how do we get out of this trap? Their problems were answered presently when they saw a woman sitting cross-legged, lost in meditation, the sole occupant of this vast city. At first, the monkeys mistook her for Sita, thinking that Ravana had obviously found the perfect concealment for her in the depths of the earth. But observing her closely, Hanuman declared that she did not bear any of the marks Rama had mentioned for identification. They woke the woman from her meditation, and when she narrated her story, they found that she had been a goddess who, for some mistake committed, had fallen from grace and had been condemned to dwell underground in this perfect setting in complete solitude precisely until this moment. After her long penance, she feasted and entertained Hanuman and his followers. Finally, through Hanuman's own powers, they were able to shatter this underworld and come out and help this strange woman to escape from her imprisonment and go back to her own heaven. They journeyed southward, leaving no stone unturned along the way, and reached the southernmost point of a mountaintop, where they watched the rolling ocean beyond and spoke among themselves. There is nothing more for us to do. We have failed. We have long passed the 1 month time limit. Should we renounce the world and stay on here as aesthetics, or take poison and end our lives? The only alternatives left for us. Angada said, when we started out, we were boastful in Rama's presence. Now, how can we go back and face him? We cannot return and report our failure. We may ask him for more time, but what shall we do with more time? If Rama asks what we are doing further, how should we answer him? I cannot bear to face Rama's disappointment. The best thing for me would be to end my life here. Some of you may go back and report the truth. One of the leaders of the party was an experienced devotee and an elder of the name Jambavan, who, although now in the form of a bear, was a ripe soul full of knowledge and wisdom. He said to Angada, you are your mother's only hope and the anointed heir apparent, and it is your duty to live. You must go back and tell Rama the truth, that you have not discovered Sita's whereabouts, and he will perhaps tell you what you should do next. And you may tell him all the others you have left behind have ended their lives. At this moment, Hanuman said, we have, of course, exceeded the time given to us, but that is unimportant. Do you realize that there are many other parts of this world and other worlds where we may have to search? Do not despair or give up. There is much that we can still do. If we are to die, let us die in battle. Remember, Jatayu, how he died nobly fighting Ravana to the last. This sounded very encouraging in the present gloom, and the mention of Jatayu brought an unexpected repercussion. When his name was mentioned, they suddenly saw a new creature approaching them. Unidentifiable and gigantic, it approached their group with difficulty, but with resolute strength. At the sight of this grotesque being, the monkeys withdrew in terror and revulsion. They thought that this was a Rakasha in a strange guise. Hanuman stood up to face and said challengingly, whether you are an Ashura or Ravana himself in this form, do not hope to escape me. I will destroy you. Whereupon it shed tears and begged. Tell me all about Jatayu, Hanuman said. Tell me who you are first, and then I will explain. And the other said, my name is Sampathi, and I'm the elder brother of Jatayu. Long ago we were separated, and now I heard you mentioned his death. Is he dead? Who killed him and why? Hanuman spent time consoling the grief-stricken Sampathi, who told his story. We were both sons of Aruna, the charioteer of the sun god. We were very happy, skimming and floating in the higher skies. One day, we decided to fly higher than ever so that we might have a glimpse of the heavens where gods reside. We flew together higher and higher and crossed paths of the sun god, who felt irritated at the sight of us. And then when he turned his full energy in our direction, Jatayu, who was protected in the shadow of my wings, was unhurt. But my feathers and wings were all burnt and charred, and I fell as a heap of bones and flesh on this mountain. It has all along been a life of great suffering for me, and I have survived because of the help of a sage who lives in this mountain. I have had enough determination to survive because I was told my redemption would come when I heard the name of Rama uttered within my earshot." When he said this, Hanuman and his men cried in one voice, "Victory to Rama." At this, the creature underwent a transformation. His feathers grew again, and his wings became large enough to lift him in the skies, and he developed into the most majestic bird. When he found that Hanuman and his followers were in despair about finding Sita, he said, "Ravana went this way with Sita. I saw him carrying Sita off to Lanka, which is farther south, and he has imprisoned her there. You will have to cross the sea somehow and find her whereabouts. Do not be disheartened by this expanse of water before you. You will ultimately succeed in your mission. Now I must take leave of you. Our tribe is without a leader since Jatayu is dead. I must take on his duties." Saying this, Sampati floated up and flew away. After Sampati left, they confessed among themselves as to how the sea was to be crossed, which they felt an utterly hopeless task to attempt until Jabavan spoke once again. He said to Hanuman, "You were the only one who was fit to cross the sea and carry the message of hope to Sita," he explained. "You are unaware of your own stature. That is part of a curse laid on you long ago by your father, that you should be ignorant to both the depths of your learning and of your own powers. This delusion will have to be overcome before you attempt anything further now. Remember that you can grow to any stature you wish, and if you so decide, you can cover the entire world in one stride, outdoing even Vishnu in the days of Mahabali. Make yourself as immense as you need, and you can have one foot on this shore and another across the sea. And on the other shore, that will be Lanka. When you have reached Lanka, make yourself inconspicuous, and your devotion to Rama will be enough to guide you to where Sita is kept." Hanuman listened to this with his head bowed in humility. "Your words give me so much courage that I feel I can vanquish and eradicate the entire race of Asuras if they will not yield to me, my goddess mother. The span of this ocean seems to me insignificant. The grace you have conferred on me and Rama's command are like two wings which will carry me anywhere." So saying, he assumed a gigantic stature. The mountain called Mahendra, which had till then loomed high in the clouds, now seemed like a pebble at his feet. He stood there looking southward, choosing his own moment to step across the ocean into Lanka. Memento from Rama. Landing on the soil of Lanka, Hanuman shrank himself to an unnoticeable size and began his search for Sita. He peeped into every building in the city. He saw several streets with houses in which Ravana had kept his collection of women from several parts of the world and other worlds. Since Ravana had grown indifferent to them after his infatuation with Sita, he ignored his favorites completely, and Hanuman noticed that in every house, women sat longingly, hoping for Ravana's return to their embraces. Hanuman presently came to an elaborate mansion with rich furnishings when he saw a woman of great beauty lolling in her bed while several attendants were fanning her. Here is the end of my quest," Hanuman said to himself, thinking that it might be Sita. He studied her features closely, recollecting again and again the description given to him by Rama. He was filled with pain and anger at the thought that Rama's wife was living in such luxury, perhaps after yielding himself to Ravana. He almost wept at the thought that while Rama was undergoing such suffering in his quest for his wife, she should live in luxury now. For a moment, Hanuman felt that there was nothing more for him to do, and that all his plans to help Rama had come to an abrupt end. While he sat there on the roof, unobtrusively watching, he realized he might be mistaken. Observing her further, he noticed several differences in the features of this woman. In spite of her beauty, she had a touch of coarseness. She slept inelegantly, with her arms and legs clumsily flung about. With her lips parted, she snored, and she talked in her sleep incoherently. "No, this could be anyone but the goddess I am seeking," Hanuman told himself with relief, and presently he understood that this was Ravana's wife, Mandodari. Hanuman moved next into Ravana's palace, observed him in his luxurious setting, and after satisfying himself that Sita was not imprisoned there, passed on. After exhausting his search of all the buildings, he decided to search in the woods and garden. He finally arrived at Asokavana. It was Ravana's favorite retreat, a magnificent parkland with orchards and grottos and pleasure gardens. When Hanuman came atop a Simsupa tree, he observed several Rakasha women, grotesque looking and fierce. Armed with weapons, sleeping on the ground, Sita was seated in their midst. He studied her closely. She answered all points of description given by Rama. Now Hanuman's doubts were gone, but he rent in his heart to see her in her present state, unkempt, undecorated, with a single piece of yellow sari covering her body, and with the dust of many days on her. Suddenly the Rakasha women got up from their sleep, closed in on Sita, and menaced and frightened her. Sita shrank away from them, but challenged them to do their worst. Presently, the tormentor saw Ravana arriving and drew aside. He approached Sita with endearing words. He alternated between frightening and cajoling her into becoming his prime mistress. But she spurned all his advances. Hanuman shuddered at the spectacle before him, but was also filled with profound respect and admiration for Sita. Eventually, Ravana went off in a great rage, ordering the fierce women to be unrelenting and break her will. After he left, the women became so menacing that Sita cried, "Oh Rama, have you forgotten me?" Presently, the woman retired, and Sita made preparations to end her life by hanging herself from a nearby tree. At this moment, Hanuman slowly appeared before Sita. Fearful lest he startled her, and hurriedly narrated who he was and why he was there. He explained all that had happened these many months. He answered all of her doubts and established his identity. Finally, he showed her Rama's ring. His assurances and his message proved a turning point in Sita's life. She gave him a single piece of jewelry that she had saved, concealed in a knot of her sari end, and requested him to deliver it to Rama as her memento. I'll pause.
So he just doesn't take her and go, I guess.
I don't remember. Let me see.